Hi there guys, got a new video for you here today. What we're going to be doing is taking a look inside the Dreamtac. Now this one's got a leak. As you can see there, both the bottle and the regulators are fully empty. Now it's a slow leak, it only seems to lose about 10 to 20 bar overnight, but as the week progresses the bottle slowly empties. So I'm guessing there's a seal gone inside, maybe on the valve, maybe on the regulator, but we're going to be taking it out and having a look. Now this Dreamtac is probably one of the most shot Dreamtacs on the planet. I would say it's had about 20,000 pallets through it, and that's no exaggeration. In that time it's worked faultlessly. It's been amazingly accurate, very consistent, and is probably one of the best guns out the box that I've ever had. Right, with all that being said, let's dive right in to the disassembly. So I've already taken off the barrel, and that's just with those two screws there. Just a 3mm Allen key to get them off, and we're going to go ahead and take the cylinder off. Now my rifle was empty before we started, but if your rifle isn't, you need to dry fire it a couple of times to get rid of the air in the reg. When your regulator's empty, it's now safe to work on the gun. So first thing we're going to do is remove the grip. That's just with a 5mm Allen key in the base of the grip there. Now that the grip's off, we can go ahead and take this bottom plate off. 4mm Allen key in these holes. And a 3mm at the back. Once that's off, we can remove the bottle adapter. We can just unscrew that. Now once we've got the bottle adapter off and we've wiped off the grease, we can see this little cover plate. What we need is a small Allen key. Hook it in there like so, and then pull it up. Can be a little stiff, but just give it a little tug and it should come off. Now we can see inside the valve housing. Now with a small set of pliers we can just pull the valve out gently. And there it is there. Stick that to one side, and once the valve is out we can see the valve seat in the bottom. Now I'm going to use my little valve puller tool. Now if I'm honest, the valve puller tool is a bit short for the Dreamtac. It does work, but it's a bit more tricky to use, so in future what I'll do is I'll make them 10mm longer. That should make them a bit easier to use. There it is there. Doesn't seem to be any damage to the valve seat or the O-ring. A little bit of debris which we'll clear off later. Right, next I'm going to take the top rail off. That's just a 4mm Allen key in the middle, and at the end here, then a 2.5 for these ones at the back. Then the top should just pull off like so. Next I'm going to take the folding buttstock off. This might be different from your rifle, but for mine I have to unlock it, then undo this screw here. That's with a 2.5mm Allen key. Then I can just unscrew the buttstock from the rifle. Okay, now the buttstock's off, what we're going to do is take the power wheel off. That's with a 2mm Allen key. Like all FX guns, be careful of the ball and the spring. And we'll take out the two springs so they don't get lost. Okay, now that it's off, what we need to do is take this back piece off. That's done with a 3mm Allen key here and here. Like so. If you want to separate these two pieces, there are two screws in there, and they're 4mm Allen keys. But for now, we're just going to leave them as one piece. Now that's off, we can go ahead and take the hammer weight, the hammer spring and the shuttle out. We'll stick that to one side. To remove the hammer we need to take out the trigger sear and the trigger. It's done with a 1.5mm Allen key in these grub screws here. And I'm going to be leaving this front one in, as I believe it's only the first stage stop. So once the grub screws are out, we can push the pins out from this side. First one releases the trigger. Second one is a sear stop. And the third one is the trigger sear pin. There's the trigger sear there. Once that's out, we can just tip the hammer at the back of the rifle. Okay, just something I've observed when I've been taking apart the rifle so far. Everything is covered in sort of like a metallic paste. Looks like aluminium fragments in some places, and it really can't be helping the operation of the rifle. I think where the fragments are coming from is this. In here it's awful chewed up, and I think what's happening is the rear of the hammer is contacting this when we pull the cocking arm back. The edge of the hammer here is really rough, so I might remake one of these things with a little Delrin insert before it goes back together. So I'll take the gauge out just in case there's a seal gone behind the gauge. Just take the cover off, and then with a 22mm spanner, or you could use an adjustable, crack the gauge loose. Next we'll take the cocking arm out, and that's just with a 1.5mm Allen key at the top here. And like the Maverick, it's just a grub screw with a shaft on it. Go ahead and pull out the pellet probe assembly. Right, and the last thing we're going to be taking out is the caliper wheel on the back here. Now to do this, all we need to do is take out this screw here. That's with a 2.5mm Allen key, and then pull it out from this side. There is going to be a spring and a ball behind this, so be very careful as you pull it out so that you don't lose either the spring or the ball. And there it is there. Right, and there we have it, an almost fully disassembled Dreamline. The only things I haven't taken out is the safety and this first stage stop pin here. You could take them out if you want, but I find no reason to take them out. So what I'm going to do now is take a good look over all the components and see if I can spot anything that may be causing us a leak. Almost forgot about this little bottle adapter here. So first of all, we'll take the cover off and remove the gauge on the side. Again, using a 22mm spanner. Crack it loose and take it off. Next, if we flip it on to the other side, we've got the fill port here. And we're going to take this off using a 14mm spanner. These are generally very tight. And there it is there. Okay, and lastly is the reg. Now as you see in this one, it's still got the anti-tamper fitted. For this video I thought I'd show you a different method. Normally I take my pointy thing, jam it in the side and just lever it up. For this video what I'm going to do is use a blowtorch, heat the end of the spiky thing up and just push it in and lever it up. Slightly different way of doing it, but this way is fairly easy, and if you've got a tight anti-tamper it gives you a bit of an edge. So we'll heat this up now. Get it nice and hot. Then poke it in nice and deep. Wait for it to cool down. You can blow on it to help it cool down. And then once it's cool, you can just lever it out. And they come out really easily that way. You don't often need to do it like that, but if they're super tight, it can be a bit easier. So a 2.5mm Allen key to take the adjuster screw out. There it is there. And a 5mm Allen key to take the body out. Here it is there, being careful of the bevel washer that can be stuck on the end. And then finally, with our reg puller tool, we can just pull the reg out. As you can see, I've never taken this apart, and it's got a fair amount of grease on there which we'll have to clean off. Right, that's the whole of the disassembly. What I'll do now is have a look at everything and see if there's anything majorly wrong. I'll have a quick look and then I'll bring you back in a second. So I've had a good look over the rifle and I think I've discovered where our fault is. This is the large diameter thin O-ring that goes in the end of here. This would be in the base of the bottle adapter there, and seals the face of the bottle adapter against the rifle. Now this O-ring is cut in a couple places and is generally in quite rough shape, as you can see there, and it just doesn't look very happy. So that's observation number one. and if you're going to replace yours, it's a 26 by 1 MBR90 O-ring. I have a spare here, so I'm just going to place that in the rifle. So I'll put that to one side. And the second thing I've noticed is a large amount of metal shavings in the action. This is the trigger, and as you can see here, it's sort of like a metallic paste over everything. This was present on the hammer, on this trigger sear, and just generally coating the inside of the rifle. Now, as I said before, I think it all stems from this. As you can see there, that ring of silver isn't supposed to be there. It's quite rough to the touch, and when it's in the rifle, the rear of the hammer comes in contact with this when you cock the hammer back. So I think these two are scraping together and creating some nastiness. What I've done is I've remade this rear part in aluminium, then just pressed a little Delrin sleeve over the top, so that now the hammer will just hit a Delrin stop and shouldn't cause any more wear or damage. I think that's going to be it. What I'll do is clean all the parts up and bring you back when we're reassembling the rifle. So I've given everything a good clean and it's all ready to go back together. To save a little time, I've already taken off all the O-rings so we can just go ahead and install the new ones. So I've done my usual tricks with the regulator, polished the end of the piston and the end of the regulator, and I've also polished the bevels. So let's get started putting it back together. First up, get the regulator piston O-ring on, small amount of silicone oil on it. Next is the adjuster screw. We'll fit our little witch's hat tool. Put a little bit of lube on the witch's hat. Then slide on the two O-rings. Like so. Then we'll just apply a small amount of silicone oil to each of them. Right, so the last O-ring goes in the bottle adapter. I've already taken the old one out so we can just go ahead and install the new one. And there it is installed. I have got a video showing how to fit these. It's on an FX Impact, however it's the same one. But as I've already shown it before, I'm just sort of speeding through it this time. Okay, so next up is the regulator. We'll restack the bevels. While I've got the regulator piston here, I just thought I'd show you a quick trick that I use. This is a syringe. What I've got on the end of it is an air tube. What I do to clean the regulator pistons is I just place the air tube over the front there, and then you can depress the syringe and it blows any debris or grease left in the piston out. I don't think I've showed that before, so that's just how I clean the inside of the pistons. Right, now we can restack the bevels. Now I've repolished these and repaired them so they're all nicely paired up. And as always, the thin ones are going at the bottom and the thicker ones are going at the top. Since we have an odd number of bevels on this stack, what we do is we keep the last one stacked like that, so it's cupped outwards towards the body, as we can see there. Right, we'll get this installed in the rifle. That again is just used with our regulator puller tool. Next, the body can go back on. That's just with a 5mm Allen key. And lastly, we can just push the adjuster screw back in and do it up with a 2.5mm Allen key. Now I know my adjuster screw was just below flush, so I'm going to adjust it in a little further than it was, and we'll readjust the pressure once the rifle is pressurised up. Next, I'm going to refit the Foster fitting with just a small amount of silicone oil on this O-ring down here. Now on my rifle this O-ring was in perfect shape, so I'm not going to replace it. Then we do that up nice and tight with a 14mm spanner. And lastly, we can refit the gauge. We'll just get it so that the FX logo is lined up with the bottom. Now all that's left to do is refit this small O-ring in the base there. As I showed you earlier, my original one was split. We'll just seat it in the bottom Now I'm just going to add a little more silicone grease to the base there so it doesn't tear again. We just wipe out the excess with our fingers. Right, we're going to set that to one side. Okay, now that that's done, we can bring back the block and start putting it together. Now it's pretty much the same as the disassembly, just in reverse. So first of all, we're going to install the cocking arm and the pellet probe carrier. First of all, we're just going to put a small amount of grease on it before that goes in. Now I'm just using lithium grease, although you can use a smear of moly if you prefer. Then with our small grub screw with the shaft on it, we can put that in the back there and do it up with a 1.5mm Allen key. Once that's in, what we can do is install the hammer spring and the hammer spring shuttle. Now this is the part I made, which I showed you earlier, and it just replaces the standard black one with a little Delrin tip on it so that we shouldn't get no more further wear. Now this is a UK Sub 12 version, but it still has the FAC spring and the hammer weight, and I've just given everything a good clean up and a polish up. Polished the hammer and I've polished the spring. So that can go back in the rifle, in the back, the bottom hole there. Once that's in, we can install the rear block here. Just slide it over the top and do these two screws up with a 3mm Allen key. Leave them loose as we'll align it at a later date, so the block's nice and wobbly at the back there. Next we'll install the power wheel. So first 2 springs drop in, then I'll just put a small amount of lithium grease over the 2 holes, drop the balls on top of the spring, and then drop the power wheel on top. Then do that up with a 2mm Allen key. Once that's done, I'm going to install the caliper wheel. I've had a good look at these O-rings and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with them, so I'm going to leave it as is. First, just put a small amount of silicone grease around them. Then reinstall the little ball and spring back in this hole here. And I'll just put a small smear of lithium grease over the top of that. Then the ball can go on. With this assembly, this slot here has to be aligned with the bottom, so make sure that that's like that. Gently push it through as to not damage the O-rings. Push it home, then realign the ball detent. Once that's done, we can use a small countersunk screw and just do that in, and that's with a 2.5mm Allen key. Now that that's on, what we'll do is we'll put the trigger sear back. Now I've given the trigger sear a good going over and a nice polish, so it should work a little better now. What we've got to do is line the trigger sear up with this back hole here, and the trigger sear goes in this way up, in that way up. Once that's in, we can put the sear stop in this second hole, and then the trigger plate can be reinstalled. Now the trigger plate goes in this way, and this spring has to hook onto the nub at the back of the trigger sear. So that bit there lines up with the spring and captures it. Once all the pins are in, they can be pushed through and the grub screws can be installed on top of them. That's just with a 1.5mm Allen key. Next I'm going to put the top and the bottom cover plates on. So first of all, reinstall the top plate, 4mm Allen key at the front here, and at the back. Then a 2.5mm Allen key in these two at the back here. What I like to do is fill the gap either side, make sure it's roughly the same, and with a small amount of pressure on the back here, we can then go ahead and do these two up here. This with a 2.5mm Allen key. Once they're done up, we can do these two 4mm Allen keys down to the final torque. Once the top's on, we can put the bottom plate back on, and similarly I like to do them all up loosely. Once we're at this stage, we can fill the gap, make sure it's the same either side, and then again with a small amount of pressure at the back, do the front two up to a final torque. This with a 4mm Allen key, and then the rear one can be done up with a 3mm. Once the top and bottoms are screwed on nicely, we can then do this back piece up. That's just with a 3mm Allen key. Next we're going to reinstall the valve, and first to go in is the valve seat. Got it in on the end of my tool here. I've already replaced this O-ring, so it's ready to go back in. And like I said with the Maverick, you've got to let it find its seat. If you push too hard, you'll tear the O-ring. There it is in the bottom there. And then we can install the valve pin. Now I've put a new O-ring on the end here. This one was just a 1.5 by 1 NBR70. Slide that in the bottom there. So it's nicely in there. And the spring can be slid over the shaft, and the small dowel ring guide. Once that's on, we can put the cap back. And that's with a little bit of silicone grease on these O-rings. I did it off camera, but I put silicone oil on both the valve and the valve seat. And the valve seat, for anyone that's wondering, is a 7 by 1.5mm. I don't know why they don't put that on the schematic, but I guess they just want you to buy a whole new valve. We'll go ahead and put the top on, and then we'll just put a small smear of silicone grease around this face here. That's what that O-ring rides on, so a bit of grease on there just helps it slide around nicely. Right, I've made a little mistake. They do happen, unfortunately, but we've got to take this bottom rail off to screw the bottle adapter back on. I was going to put the valve on first, but I decided to do it in a different order. It's come back to bite me. But no worries. Take the bottom rail off, then we can put the bottle valve back on. When you're getting near to where you want it, be very careful and just screw around slowly. Get it nice and lined up so it's flat, and then we can reinstall the bottom plate. 3mm Allen key at the back and a 4mm in these two middle screws. Just making sure it's nice and straight. Right, almost done. We'll put the regulator gauge back on. Just lining up the FX logo with the bottom there, and then we can put our gauge covers back on. After that, we'll put our grip back on. Now, this is a different grip than what came off. The other grip was a hard plastic one. I didn't really like it that much, so I'm going to replace it back with a standard FX grip. And that's done with a 5mm Allen key, putting the bolt through the bottom, and then screwing it on the rifle. Next we can reinstall the butt piece. Now on this one it just screws in, and lastly we can reinstall the cylinder. Okay, that's going to be about it for this one, guys. All that we've got to do now is fill it up with air and leak test it. I'm sure that O-ring was the problem, so I have no doubts that this will now hold air very nicely. So a couple of things I want to just talk about briefly before I let you go. I want to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed, as we're now at just over 1,000 subscribers, which is really quite nice. Secondly, other content is on the way. I know we've been a bit heavy on the FX stuff as of late, but I do plan on doing other guns as and when I get my hands on them. Someone left a comment asking for sort of more budget end guns, which I'm open to do. The only thing I will say is that I'm not sponsored by anyone, and all the rifles that you see on the channel are either mine or very good friends. So I won't be able to pick up every single rifle that comes out or have access to all of them. But that being said, I've always wanted to buy a really cheap PCP and see how good we can make it. So that might be coming to the channel at a later date. But for now guys, I want to thank you all for watching and see ya in the next one.